For 300 years, science has told the story of separation. It's told us that life is completely random, human life is random, that we're separate from our bodies and powerless to have any effect on healing our bodies, that we're separate from the world around us, that civilization is only 5,000 years old and we are at the pinnacle of sophistication, and that competition is the way to solve our problems. Those are now called false assumptions of science, 6 false assumptions. And the world that we have today is the result of those false assumptions. New discoveries have given us new reasons to change all of those. New discoveries are telling us that life itself, origin of life, it's not random, that human life is not random, that we're deeply connected to our bodies, we're deeply connected to the earth, civilization is cyclic, and nature is based upon cooperation. And if we can embrace those new truths as we solve the greatest crises, the biggest problems that we've ever been asked to face, then we open the door to a beautiful new world based upon sustainable ways of thinking and sustainable ways of living. And that's why I'm excited about this conversation.
Most of us would consider a miracle, which is self-healing. Like, a lot of people still don't believe that there is such thing, and they need, again, they need proof. They need to have a neighbor who did that. They need to see it on TV, filmed in, you know, real time. They need proof to believe that. Why is that? And is it really possible?
When we look at our bodies and what our own science now is beginning to help us understand, it is very similar to what our most cherished and ancient indigenous and spiritual traditions have always said. What science is telling us is this, is that the cells in our bodies that determine our health respond to the chemistry released by the brain. And the chemistry released by the brain is triggered from the feelings in the human heart. What we know is that every moment of every day, there's a conversation between our heart and our brain. It's a two-way conversation. Our heart is sending signals to the brain, and based upon those signals, the brain releases chemistry into the body. When we feel frightened, angry, hate, jealousy, rage, frustration, that sends a very jagged, irregular signal to the brain, and it releases stress chemistry, which is good for a moment, but it's not good 24/7.
Do we see that? Do we see that jagged? Because that's what was another point of view. Like, how do we know it's like this? How do we sense it? Do we film it? Do we record it somehow?
The answer is yes to everything that you said. There's an organization called the Institute of Heart Math, HEARTMATH, but it's all one word. They're based in Northern California. I am not their employee, but I have worked closely with them for 20 years now. And they are pioneers in uncovering the deepest mysteries of the human heart in ways that conventional science does not. So conventional science says the heart pumps blood. Well, you can make a machine to do that, but what else does our heart do? So the Institute of Heart Math, to answer your question, has documented this, the information between the heart, and you can actually see the information between the heart and the brain when we feel feelings of well-being, appreciation, gratitude, compassion, care. Then the signal is a very smooth, rhythmic signal to our brain, and our brain says, the world is safe, so I don't need the stress chemistry. So it begins to release the anti-aging hormones in our bodies, and powerful immune response is created within our bodies in the presence of this smooth signal. The connection is called coherence, heart-brain coherence, and optimum coherence now has been measured. It's a very low frequency, 0.10 hertz. That is the language that whales communicate in the oceans. It's a very low frequency. So if we can create the feelings in our hearts, for example, of 0.10 hertz, that is an optimum connection between our heart and our brain, and that begins releasing the healing chemistry from our brain into the cells of our bodies, and this has been documented. It reduces high blood pressure, reduces vascular plaque, reduces the chances for stroke. When we are able to feel those kinds of feelings sustained over long periods of time, the immune system increases. The DHEA level is the precursor to all hormones in the body. Every hormone must have the DHEA. DHEA increases 100% from only 3 minutes of feeling the feelings: appreciation, gratitude, compassion, love, while the stress chemistry decreases 23% in the same time, and all we're doing is having a feeling. Those are the qualities that the body needs to begin to heal itself. There is a woman that comes into the room for healing. The healer is on one side of the wall. The woman receiving the healing is on the other side of the wall. The two women have never met. They have never spoken. The woman being healed has no idea who is on the other side of the wall. Time equals 0. This is the inflamed cyst on the ovary. 3 minutes later, look at what happens. Time equals 3. The tumor is shrinking. Time equals 7. 7 minutes later, the tumor no longer exists. It's gone. What's happening in the brain of the woman doing the healing? The scientists are scanning the brain. So let's look at the brain scan. The healing is beginning to happen. What is happening in the brain of the healer? Watch this. The left and the right brain, something very interesting happens. Look at this. Look at this. The left brain, the logic, the thinking, is becoming so inactive it doesn't even register. Look at the white. But the right brain links us with intuition, with emotion, with feeling, and look at what happens in the right brain. It's beginning, look at this, it goes from the blue to the green to the yellow. Look at this. Now the right brain is really active. What's happening in the left brain? Not very much. That is the answer. The left brain is very inactive. But look at what's happening to the woman's body. So whatever is happening between these two women, the healer is not using her left brain. She's not thinking, tumor, go away. She's not thinking, healing, be healed. She's not doing that. This suggests she's not thinking much at all. But she has activated her right brain, which is directly linked to the heart. The right brain and the heart are directly linked. So our bodies are designed to heal themselves. And our own science now has shown every organ in every cell, every organ in our body has now been documented with the potential to heal itself. Even organs we were told could not heal themselves. Brain tissue, heart tissue, spinal cord tissue, pancreatic tissue, all has been documented at regeneration and healing under the right conditions and the right environment. So the thinking of science is that the environment must come from a pill or a machine. Exterior. Mm-hmm. Our most cherished traditions always told us that we had the ability to do this for ourselves, but science didn't really understand that. And now science is beginning to validate that we may create within our own bodies, through the power of emotion, heart-based emotion, the very experiences that begin healing the human body.
Have you ever tried it on yourself?
I will share with you a story. The answer is yes. In the year 2000, I went for an annual physical, and my doctor told me that I had a growth inside of my bladder that should not be there, and needed to come out quickly. He scheduled surgery. And in the fall of 2000, I went into the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida, and underwent the anesthetic, went into the operating room for the full procedure. But here's what happened in between. Before I went into the doctor, I had studied all my life ancient traditions, ancient texts in the monasteries of Tibet and Bolivia and Peru. And I said, now, if I were ever going to apply these in my life, now is the time. So when my doctor gave me the diagnosis, I said, give me 2 weeks to work with myself. And I did everything that I'd been taught to do, but still I had the doubt in my mind. So I went to the hospital, I went to the procedure, I woke up in the recovery room and the doctor said, why are you here? He said, there's nothing inside of you to remove. He said,
you weren't operated at all?
He said, they used a scope. Okay, so they used the anesthetic, they put me under, they used the scope, and the scope showed that there was no reason to operate, there was nothing there. He says, why are you here?
Wow.
And I was still under anesthetic, and I tried to tell him about what I'd learned. It didn't work.
You have the chance now. What did you do?
Well, this is, I think, why it was good for me to have the experience, because I had studied all of the traditions, and I knew it was possible. But because I had the experience myself, I can look you in the eye, I can look at our listeners and our viewers, and I can say, I had this experience, and I know it's possible. And I also know that it may not be easy, because when our body has an illness or disease, we lose the faith in our body. We lose trust. And we must work to overcome that. And I think it's the greatest lesson for any of us to learn, because once we discover that we have that ability, we feel differently about life and our friends and our families, and we feel differently about our relationship to the world. So I can look at you and say, what I did was all the things that I'd learned to do to create the coherence, the heart-brain coherence, to heal the anger, to heal the hurt, heal the frustration, create the coherence between my heart and my brain to the best of my ability throughout the day. I did it as many times as I could. And I cannot say that is the only reason. As a scientist, I have to say I think it was a factor in the healing that I experienced.
I know there are experiments that started in the 1990s. I mean, it's where, you know better, you know, but in Russia or...
Russia started in the 60s. In the 1960s, the Russians were ahead of other countries in the West, acknowledging, first, even exploring the possibility. To make the experiment, you must ask the question. And because most scientists were taught the false assumptions, the 6 false assumptions, that we're separate from our bodies, that we're separate from the world, that consciousness has no effect on the world around us, they don't even ask the question. So in the 1960s, I know the former Soviet Union, the cosmonauts, were doing experiments from space with telepathy, for example. That's only possible through a field that connects all things. So I'm not saying that we understand everything. What I'm saying is that new discoveries that are not shared in the classroom or in the mainstream media now are opening the door to new possibilities to give us new ways to think about ourselves and our relationship to the world. Personal healing is a part of that.
Yeah, but people have a problem understanding and accepting this. Like,
I know.
even I was talking to someone, you know, preparing for this interview. I was giving the example with Poponin, you know, who had that experiment
Yes.
with human. You tell it. You know it better.
Well, if I understand the experiment that you're
human DNA, yeah.
You're talking about, what the scientists did was they took particles of light that are called photons. And if our viewers are not familiar with a photon, it's the stuff that atoms are made of. So the scientists were able to take the building blocks of atoms that our world, our bodies are made of, and they put them into a vacuum. So they took all the air out of this container, and they measured to see where are they, what is the distribution, and it was random. They were everywhere, just what they expected. The next part of the experiment is they took human DNA and placed the human DNA into the vacuum with the photons. Now, to even think to do that experiment tells me that science
Had a question.
is on the edge of a big discovery, to even think to do that. So what happened was they put the DNA in with the photons, then they said, what is the distribution?
What effect do we have on the stuff our world is made of? Conventional science says we have no effect. But here's what the experiment is showing. All of a sudden, the photons align themselves along the DNA. Now, that is an amazing experiment, because what it's saying is this. It's saying that the stuff you are made of, your DNA, has a direct effect on the stuff the world is made of, the photons of the atoms of matter. And that is the first time it was shown under controlled conditions in the laboratory. Very controversial, very interesting.
So that was the laboratory. The question is, how far does that effect extend into the real world? And this is where the scientists now are doing experiments to see if it's only localized in one place, how far something like this actually goes. So that was an example, and you were giving that example. But yes, it is difficult for many people to embrace the idea that we could possibly influence the healing of our bodies, or that we could possibly influence the peace in a community or the peace between nations. But the experiments are showing very, very clearly that this is in fact a possibility under the right conditions. And the reason it's possible, it all goes back to the proof that we are in fact connected by a field of energy. 1944, Max Planck, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, he made a statement. It was so profound. He said, what we see as matter doesn't really exist the way we think it exists. He said, behind everything we see as matter, he said, there is a conscious and intelligent mind that is the matrix, that was his word, the matrix of all matter. John Wheeler, Princeton University, bore that out through his experiments. John Wheeler said that the universe is not complete, that it is us, the act of consciousness is constantly interacting with the fields around us, creating our reality, essentially. The good things that happen, the bad things that happen.
So we can actually create our life in every moment, and we can change everything that happens to us in every second?
Theoretically, I think it's possible. The problem is that we say with our words, I would like to change, but in our hearts and our minds, we have the fear and the doubt that prevents that change. And this is where the real workshop of life begins.
You said at some point that we can literally move mountains. And you've been around the world, you've seen many, many powerful things and many proofs with your own eyes. How can we do that? This is another very strong, thing that most of us wouldn't think it's possible. We all think it's literally impossible.
What quantum physics is now suggesting, and what our most cherished indigenous and ancient spiritual traditions have always said, is the world around us is nothing more, nothing less than a mirror of what we accept as our reality. So if we accept the suffering, if we accept the hurt and the pain, if we accept war as the reality, then we can certainly continue to experience that. When we claim the cooperation and the peace that is actually the model that nature is based upon, then that becomes a new reality. The key is to collectively, this is a collective choice,